Now we would go back to Dr. Mudit Agrawal with his second presentation on mucormycosis, what the disease is and about the management. After that, we will have the expert comments by our stalwart Dr. Deepak Behrani sir on the whole session. After that, we will have the comments by Harsh Dikshit IS. And in the end, we will just keep 15 minutes for the question because we've already exceeded our time limit. So over to you, Mudit, without any delay.
Thank you, Amrin. I will share my screen. So, am I audible now?
Yes, you are audible. You are audible.
Okay. Good evening again, respected dignitaries of IMA. My last topic today is mucormycosis or COVID-associated mucormycosis, as we should say. So the objectives of my talk today would be, I would be covering it very shortly because already it has been around 7:30. So why there is urgency in treating COVID-associated mucormycosis? What are the fungi which are involved? Association of COVID with mucormycetes. Why are we seeing this in mucormycetes in this second wave? What are the diagnosis and imaging part of the infection, the management, and the transcutaneous retroorbital amphotericin B therapy, drugs, if any alternatives available, and finally, the exenteration, which I would not like to talk upon. It's a destructive surgery. So why to treat urgently? We know that this is a very fulminant disease with high mortality between 40 to 80%. Practically, if the fungus has invaded the CNS, the practical mortality is 100%, although in literature we are seeing 40 to 80%. And there are better survival outcomes if we start therapy early and do the debridement as early as possible. The survival rates could be up to 61% if the therapy is initiated early. So what are the pathogens? We all know that is a fungi of the order Mucorales, and the main fungus involved is the Rhizopus, then Mucor and Rhizomucor. Some Carangamella have also been isolated. Other bacteria are also involved, other fungus are also involved in Mucorales. But why there is sudden rise in COVID? So there are many factors. One of them is innate immunity is down. We know that COVID breaks down the epithelial barrier in the nasal passages. So mucor, which is ubiquitous, gains easy access across nasal mucosa and becomes invasive. Then COVID causes macrophages to get dysfunctional, and macrophages, as we know, are the first line of defense in our body. So mucor suddenly becomes aggressive. Another important factor is the patients patients have deranged blood sugar levels due to many factors again. One is COVID itself is known to produce insulin resistance by affecting pancreatic epithelial cells. Also, most of these patients affected with mucormycosis have been receiving steroids earlier, or maybe at the time of infection also, which is overall suppressing the innate immunity and further raising the blood sugar levels. When blood sugar is very high, this affects neutrophil functional capacity, and the extravasation capacity of neutrophils are affected. And these neutrophils are found to have prominent features of pre and immature markers. So neutrophils are, as we know, are the second line of defense. So now both first line of defense, macrophages, and second line of defense, neutrophils, are down. Also, there is oxidative stress in any disease, and more so ever in COVID. That is aided by the oxygen therapy. This further raises oxidative stress. Also, iron overload is there after cytokine storm. So lots of ferritin is available and Mucor has affinity for this ferritin. Other proposed etiologies are humidifiers, the uncleaned or the tap water in the humidifiers, or the cleaning of the oxygen delivery systems. Lately, oxygen has been procured from industries, so uncleaned industrial oxygen could be the reason. Definitely, unclean masks have been shown to proliferate many microbes, including the fungi. So what are the early signs and symptoms? The early signs are like symptoms are like stuffy nose, pain around the orbits, jaw and teeth of the patient, swelling of any one side of the face, a blackish discoloration of the skin, and the patient could have a dull headache because of the trigeminal branch of trigeminal nerve as the early sign. When the disease progresses, the patient could report to you with blurred vision, diplopia, or the double vision. There could be complete loss of vision when the fungi invades the orbital apex, or when it invades the arteries of eye, like ophthalmic artery or the central retinal artery, causing its occlusion. Once it involves the brain, patients may have CNS symptoms like seizures, loss of consciousness, and focal neurological deficit. And what are the diagnostic modalities? In imaging part, MRI has to be done, MRI of orbit, brain, PNS with gadolinium contrast. CT scan is not recommended because, as I just said, that fungi is angioinvasive, so it causes the blockage of arteries, and that can only be assessed with the help of gadolinium contrast in MRI. Direct microscopy from the specimen taken while doing debridement and subjecting it to coage mount or chalcofluor white stain. It can be grown in fungal media for sensitivity of antifungal drugs like SDA or PDA. Then PCR is very, very sensitive and very specific, but the only thing is that it takes around 2 days to come. Therefore, although we are the ENT or the eye surgeon when, or even the maxillofacial surgeon when doing the debridement, knows then itself that it is a mucormycetes infection. And now some serological markers lately is the talk of medical fraternity, whether it should be done like lactomannan and 1,3 beta glucan test. These are not very important, but if it is done and it comes out to be positive, then we should think of the mixed invasive fungal infection like aspergillosis along with mucormycetes. The drugs available, we all know, is the amphotericin B, is the prime drug, and 2 forms are available in amphotericin B. One is deoxycholate form, other one is the liposomal form. A short comparison between the two, efficacy of, obviously the liposomal form is having the much better efficacy. Deoxycholate also has good efficacy. It's not that it is not effective. So it can be used in when amphotericin B of the liposomal form is not available, with some reservations. Coming to the side effects, fever, chills, electrolyte imbalances like low potassium, low magnesium, and kidney toxicity are nearly double in deoxycholate form. There could be renal tubular acidosis in both the drugs. Bone marrow suppression, both are equal. Dose is much lower in deoxycholate form as compared to the liposomal form, and cost obviously is much pocket friendly to the patient when using deoxycholate form. But again, I would say that liposomal form, if available, should be the prime therapy. Although the therapy would cost around 2.5 to maybe 3 lakhs without gray market. Coming to the treatment part, first is the medical management as well as the surgical management. Both should be carried on together. Patients should be subjected to the surgical debridement also along with the medical management. So we start with liposomal amphotericin B. The dose is 5 to 10 mg per kg. Preferably, the patient should be started with 5 mg per kg, and slow escalation of the drug, like starting from 1 mg per kg or 2 mg per kg, should not be done. This is very important, because then it is not effective and we are wasting the drug. It should be started in all the patients. Patients who, the physicians who feel that simultaneously posaconazole has to be given, can be given if available. If the patient is not responding to the amphotericin B, it has to be given. Posaconazole dosage is 300 mg BID for day 1 and then 300 mg OD for another 2 weeks in all the patients not responding to the amphotericin B. Then coming to the surgical management, all the patients having confirmed mucormycetes infection or high suspicion of mucormycetes should be surgically posted for debridement. Aim of surgical debridement is to remove all the affected mucosa. So it is not the FES surgery. People are talking that FES should be done. Although I'm not an ENT surgeon, but as far as I know, in FES surgery, mucosa is saved, while this type of surgery is known as endoscopic endonasal debridement and should be repeated as and when required. It is very important. I will again reiterate that it should be repeated when the treating doctor feels that again the need for debridement has risen. Coming to the TRAM, or the transcutaneous retrobulbar amphotericin B, it should be tried only in those patients where the vision has not gone, or the chances of restoring the vision is still there. The dose of the retrobulbar injection is 3.5 mg per ml, preferably in supromedial quadrant of the orbit. And before injecting the amphotericin B retroorbitally, 0.5 xylocaine has to be injected because it could be very painful. If TRAM is started, it should continue for around 5 to 7 days. And finally, orbital exenteration, when the orbits are involved extensively, or orbital apex is involved, or the fungus has invaded the CNS. Now, how to decide the response assessment? In patients having stable disease or having some good response, we have to continue with the first line of treatment, or we can change to isavuconazole also. The dose of isavuconazole per oral is 200 mg, 3 tablets on day 1 and 2, and from day 3, 200 mg per day. Continued till how long is a question mark. If the disease is progressing, then isavuconazole IV has to be switched over to a dose, again I have mentioned, or if liposomal amphotericin B is available, the dose should be increased to 10 mg per kg. Although it is a renal toxic drug, but we don't have any choice. In cases of toxicity, when the renal parameters are going down, we have to switch over from amphotericin B to isavuconazole or posaconazole. How to administer amphotericin B? We have to infuse a normal saline 500 ml at least before injecting amphotericin B. Amphotericin B has to be given in 5% dextrose solution. If an infusion pump is available, even 50 ml to 100 ml of 5% dextrose would do the job. And because these patients, we don't want to subject them to another metabolic stress. And if it is not available, then around 200-300 ml of 5% dextrose given over around 5 to 6 hours at least. And post infusion also normal saline has to be given. Simultaneously, we have to measure potassium, creatinine, and magnesium at least alternate days. If this is a liposomal. If not, then preferably daily we have to monitor these parameters. Known fact that it causes hypokalemia, which can continue for weeks. This is very, very important, that hypokalemia can continue for weeks even after stopping the therapy of amphotericin B. So important to monitor the potassium levels for few months. One patient I came to know that he received this therapy and stopped taking monitoring his potassium levels. After around 6 to 7 weeks, he succumbed to a cardiac arrest, maybe because of a low potassium. Then again, how long for the treatment should be continued? Again, is there is no definite answer for that because antifungals that we know that have to be given for sometimes weeks, sometimes months, and maybe years. But we are thinking that at least few weeks to at least 1 or 2 months have to be given. Now factors, what are the factors that are affecting the duration of treatment? One is if the blood sugar control is achieved, decay is not there, or immune suppression is now not there, patient is not on steroids, there is no neutropenia, that duration of therapy could be reduced. If a thorough surgical debridement was possible, and multiple patient has been subjected to multiple surgical debridement as need occurs, shortens the duration of antifungal therapy. And practically speaking, therapy should be continued until the resolution of signs and symptoms of the infection. And on MRI, there are marked radiographic improvements. This is according to the Lancet published in 2019. Certain protocols that Dr. Sir Gangaram Hospital in Delhi is following in the ICU and COVID wards to prevent mucormycosis infection is the baseline HbA1c on admission of each and every patient, whether diabetic or non-diabetic. The physicians try to control the blood sugar very strictly. And there should be no decay. Obviously, rational use of steroids. My previous speakers have talked a lot about them. Respected Dr. Parimal Swami sir has reiterated many times. But again, I would say that this is as per the patient's condition. If physician has to use, nothing can be done. Now nasal douche can be done by isotonic saline 2 times a day, or some physicians are even recommending a mouthwash, as Dr. Sachin Kuchia sir has said, mouthwash with or gargles with betadine. Maintaining strict hygiene of oxygen delivery system like humidifiers. I've also reiterated in my previous talk about the role of methylene blue, possible role of methylene blue. And Dr. Amren Pandey has already told that since a few weeks, since his hospital is using, and other hospitals that are using methylene blue in humidifiers, they have not had even a single case of mucormycosis. Finger crossed for that. Complete ENT and ophthal evaluation should be done on admission and between day 3 or day 7 as per the condition in high risk group. High risk group, we all know that diabetic patients, poor metabolic control patients, old patients, immunosuppressed patients, and MRI, PNS, and orbit has to be done at any point when there is high clinical suspicion during when the patient is admitted. Now, at the time of discharge, what should be done? At the time of discharge of a completely recovered COVID patient with high risk factors, with high risk factors, I would say, diagnostic nasal endoscopy, otoscopy, and palatal examination should be done. But again, physicians or ENT surgeons would be little cautious in doing, because they have just recovered. There could be chances of contamination or the cross infection to the surgeons. Deep nasal swab for QH smear and fungal culture should be done. Biopsy should be done in very high clinical suspicion patients. And in high clinical suspicion patients, better to start liposomal amphotericin B without waiting for the microbiological reports and without subjecting them to the endoscopic debridement. Radiological evaluation has to be done in high clinical suspicion during the time of discharge. Now, this is very important. What should be advised to the patient or to the caregiver at the time of discharge of the patients? This should be followed very strictly, because patients, although are knowing that there is black fungus going on, but they don't know when to report and what are the symptoms. So I have already told about these symptoms, that if there is nasal blockage or stuffiness, blood tinged or black nasal discharge, headache or dull headache, pain in the eye and surrounding area, one-sided facial pain, swelling or numbness, toothache. Dear dentist might also be having these types of mucor patients with reports of toothache, loosening teeth, discomfort during chewing, or any discomfort around the jaw. Swelling of the eye and adnexa, double vision or the blur vision. These symptoms should be reported to the treating doctor as soon as possible. Now, a word about prophylaxis. Should the prophylaxis be given to all the suspected patients? I would say it should not be, because already we have scarcity of the drugs. Drugs are not easily available even to the affected patients. Drugs have high toxicity levels and high side effects like renal toxicity, etc. And moreover, less than 5% of these COVID patients are catching mucor infection. So it is not justifiable to give posaconazole or isavuconazole as a prophylaxis to en masse in COVID patients. Lastly, other modalities. This is my idea. I don't know. I would take the opinion of respected Dr. Parimal Swami sir and Sachin Kuchya sir in that. Other modalities should be tried, like inhalational amphotericin B therapy by nebulizer, because directly all the PNS and nasal mucosa will get this amphotericin B directly without subjecting the body to the side effects. If they are there, I would like to have their opinion. I would finish here. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, IMA. Thank you, Dr. Amrin Pandey, for inviting me over here. That was a wonderful session. Previously, all the speakers were wonderful. Thank you again.